His name was Thomas Sankara, and in 4 years he did what most governments cannot do in 40. He fed his country. He vaccinated 2.5 million children in 1 week. He planted 10 million trees. He built schools with his bare hands alongside ordinary citizens. He banned luxury cars for government officials and made ministers take the bus. He refused IMF loans and told the world exactly why. And on October 15, 1987, his best friend had him shot 12 times. This is the story of the most dangerous man in Africa. Dangerous not because he had weapons. Dangerous because he had results. Burkina Faso sits in the heart of West Africa. No coastline, no oil, landlocked and dry. When France colonized it, they called it Upper Volta, named after a river, and treated it as a labor reserve for their more profitable colonies. Burkinabe men were taken to work on French plantations in Ivory Coast. Burkinabe land grew cotton for French companies. Burkinabe children attended French schools that taught them French history, French language, and French culture, and nothing about who they were before France arrived. When independence came in 1960, France made sure it came with conditions. The franc CFA, the colonial currency still controlled by the French treasury, remained in place. French military bases stayed on Burkinabe soil. French companies kept their contracts. Independence changed the flag. France kept everything else. Into this world, Thomas Sankara was born in 1949. He was the son of a gendarme. Bright, disciplined, musically gifted. He played guitar. He read voraciously. He questioned everything. When he joined the military, he rose quickly, not through connections, but through ability. By the early 1980s, he was making speeches that were circulating across West Africa on cassette tapes. Not because they were angry, because they were true. He said African debt was not a debt. It was a colonial tool designed to keep Africa permanently dependent on the same powers that had colonized it. He said African leaders who accepted IMF conditions were not governing their countries. They were managing their countries on behalf of foreign creditors. He said the resources of Africa belong to the people of Africa, not to French companies, not to the World Bank, not to Washington, to the people. These were not radical ideas. They were obvious ideas. And that is exactly what made them so threatening. On August 4, 1983, Sankara came to power in Burkina Faso. He was 33 years old. What he did in the next 4 years has never been repeated anywhere on the African continent. He renamed the country. Upper Volta, the colonial name, was buried. Burkina Faso was born. Land of upright people. He cut his own presidential salary to the equivalent of $450 a month. He sold the government fleet of Mercedes cars and replaced them with the cheapest available Renault. He told his ministers to take the bus, not as a photo opportunity, as permanent policy. He said a politician who cannot live like the people he serves cannot serve the people. Then he got to work. 2.5 million children vaccinated against meningitis, yellow fever, and measles. In 1 week. 1 week. He did not wait for international aid organizations to organize it. He mobilized the military, the civil service, and community volunteers and moved across the country like a wave. The World Health Organization called it one of the most remarkable public health achievements in African history. He launched a literacy program that dramatically increased the percentage of Burkinabe who could read within 2 years. He launched a land reform that redistributed land from feudal chiefs to ordinary farmers. He built schools, not by contracting foreign companies, but by organizing communities to build them together. Over 300 schools in 2 years. He planted 10 million trees across the Sahel to push back the desert that was consuming farmland across the region. 10 million trees. Because he understood that poverty in the Sahel was partly an environmental crisis and that no foreign aid package would fix a problem you had to plant your way out of. And he told women, for the first time in Burkinabe history, that their role was not limited to the home. He appointed women to government positions. He banned female genital mutilation and forced marriage. He said the revolution was not complete until women were free. In 1984, he stood at the United Nations General Assembly. In military fatigues, every other head of state wore a suit. He wore what his soldiers wore. And he delivered one of the most powerful speeches in the history of that institution. He said, "He who feeds you controls you." He said African debt was illegitimate because it had been contracted by colonial governments for colonial purposes and the people never benefited from it. He proposed collective debt refusal across the entire African continent. He said if Burkina Faso alone refused the debt, they would be called crazy. But if all of Africa refused together, the creditors would be the ones asking for a meeting. The African heads of state in the room looked at him. Some nodded. None followed. Because France was watching. Blaise Compaoré had been Sankara's closest friend since military school. They had fought together, built the revolution together. Sankara trusted him completely. In the months before October 1987, Compaoré began holding private meetings with French diplomatic representatives and Ivorian President Félix Houphouët-Boigny, one of France's most loyal African allies and a man who had publicly called Sankara a destabilizing force. On October 15, 1987, Sankara was meeting with colleagues at the Council of the Untold building in Ouagadougou. Armed men sent by Compaoré entered the building. Sankara and 12 of his colleagues were killed. Sankara was 37 years old. Compaoré announced himself as the new leader of Burkina Faso the same day. Within months, the IMF arrived in Ouagadougou with the structural adjustment conditions Sankara had refused. Compaoré accepted everyone. The trees kept growing. The schools Sankara had built kept standing. But the revolution that built them was over. Compaoré ruled Burkina Faso for 27 years. In 2014, a popular uprising finally removed him. He fled to Ivory Coast, where he has lived in comfort ever since. In 2022, a Burkinabe court convicted Compaoré in absentia for the assassination of Thomas Sankara. In absentia, because France has never extradited him. Because Ivory Coast has never handed him over. Because the man who killed the most effective leader Africa produced in the 20th century is still living freely in a country that France still controls through the CFA franc. Here is what I want you to sit with. Not a question, not a call to action, just a thought. Sankara had no oil, no diamonds, no gold, no strategic minerals. He had dry landlocked Sahel land in 4 years. And he vaccinated 2.5 million children, planted 10 million trees, built 300 schools, and told the IMF no. With no oil, imagine what he would have done with Nigeria's resources. Imagine what he would have done with Congo's cobalt. Imagine what he would have done with Libya's oil. They did not kill him because he was failing. They killed him because he was succeeding. And that is the most important sentence in this entire video. Share this with someone who has never heard his name. Because the fact that you know Che Guevara and you do not know Thomas Sankara is not an accident. It is a decision someone made about whose story gets told. Find us on YouTube, search official The Odd Archive. And if this page has been worth your time, leave us a review on Facebook. It takes 30 seconds, and it puts this content in front of the people who need it most.